Okay, we're going to continue learning um, Sicha from Shavuos, Tafshin Yud, 1950. We'll learn a little bit. It's Erev Shabbos. Rebbe says as follows: "Behemshech lamadubur Beis. This that we spoke about, that the Rebbe spoke at the Sicha of the Beis, which is the birthday of the Rebbe Maharash. Al derech ha'atzah, with the suggestion, v'negei lechizik iskashrus, that each one of us should strengthen our iskashrus, our connection, our bond with the Rebbe. Each person should take upon themselves two things. Something with regard to yourself, strengthen your own Yiddishkeit, your own hiskashrus, and something that's within regard to someone else. Is Hine the Rebbe, so the Rebbe adds to this, whoever accepted upon themselves, up until this point, from Beis year till Shavuos, which was a little over a month, to be machazik themselves with two things, one for yourself, and I'm assuming it's two, one for yourself and one with someone else, or two with yourself, two with someone else. It seems more like one, take on one thing of iskashrus for yourself and one thing of iskashrus that is in participation with someone else, either working on someone or teaching someone. Should say l'chaim. Those who have not yet accepted upon themselves to add two things: one in iskashrus for themselves, and the other thing is in iskashrus connecting to the Rebbe, bonding with the Rebbe with regard to someone else. They should say l'chaim also. They should accept upon themselves going forward to add these two things. Rebbe continues, Yud Beis Tammuz Hashata. This year, Yud Beis Tammuz means the year Tafshin, Yud, 1950. Yimalu Shivim Shana Lahiledes K'vay Kedushas Marikam Yadvar. That this is going to be the birthday, the 70th birthday of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was born in Tav Reish Mem, which is 1880 till Tafshin Yud. He passed away, and this year Tafshin Yud is the Rebbe would be turning 70 on Yud Beis Tammuz Tafshin Yud. Again, this is 3 months after the passing of Frierdiker Rebbe. So, i.e., the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away a few months before his 70th birthday. Because with a new year starts a new decade, a new time. Like it says in the Mishnah, it's been Shivim the Seva, the sage, the age of 70 is a ripe old age. It's not Zikna Seva, is kind of to be like a sage. It's Srichim Lahaschat Kufa Chadash Bechol Yani Avodah Tekvakdish Marcham Yadmer. So it means the Frierdiker Rebbe is starting a new decade in his life. Shahochem Nimshachem Kol Zman Shadayin Leinis Daimish Lichusa. Shuinin de Ben Meya Kilu Meis Vaver Vat Ben Olam. A person's continuing to grow. In the 70th year, the Rebbe is going to the 7th year, the 7th decade. He still is continuing to grow. Like the Mishnah says, you're growing until the year 100. So a person turns 100. And then even then there's growth, but in a different way, as the Rebbe said later. So we have a little bit of time, just under a month, and now we're learning the Sicha. It's just about a month to Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz. Ad Yud Beis Tammuz, v'lifal binyanim shel Rebbe v'likras Yud Beis Tammuz yistarach litin divrei cheshbon. Everyone should get ready with her obligations to the Rebbe, and this could apply to us Gimel Tammuz, because the comes Yud Beis Tammuz, we're going to have to give a cheshbon, we're going to have to give a calculation of how we've done in our iskashrus and getting ready for the Rebbe's 70th year. Again, this is talking 1950 with regard to his father of the previous Rebbe. But again, the whole idea of these talks are really meant for us to understand how we're supposed to view, it doesn't have to be the exact years or the exact dates, how we're supposed to view our getting ready in iskashrus, especially in the years post-Gimel Tammuz. One of the things that the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted, that the Bachrim specifically should be involved in, is Hanasiya B'Shlichus Merkas Liyan Chinuch. We know that one of the organizations that the Rebbe was put in charge by the Frierdiker Rebbe and stayed in charge, and ended up being the organization that all Chabad Shluchim run under, is the organization, because it was a few Chabad organizations, Malach, which is Merkas Liyan Chinuch, Institution for Jewish Education. Central Organization for Jewish Education. The Tkufas Akaites, and the custom was the Bachrim till today would go in the summer on Merkez Shlichus, Shlichus for Merkez. It's called Merkez Shlichus, you're a Shliach for Merkez, for Central Organization of Jewish Education. B'Shana Shavra, Rebbe says the previous year, meaning the year 1949, it's at time and Shoinim for reasons that's not clear. People were kind of weak in the year 1949 and going on the Merkez Shlichus, which was Shlichus again, where the young Bachar would go out to cities, and the idea is to take Sfarim, but the idea is to reach out to people, etc. He says, so the Rebbe says, so this year we have to try to make up for what we lacked last year. So those who were in my morning's class, we learned about the idea of the 7 days of Hashlama. The Rebbe says, the truth is, there's no real way to make up. Tashlum means when you don't do something, you're giving us another chance to make up for what you lost. It only applies if there's a void of time that wouldn't be used and now is being applied to something you should have done earlier. But if you have to always do the shlichus of the Rebbe, you can never really make up for something that's been lost, because the time that you're using to make up for lost time is time you're supposed to be doing the shlichus of the Rebbe's missions now. So the Rebbe says, just like the laws of learning Torah, you can't make up. Why? Because if I didn't learn yesterday, I can't make up for today. Because today I have to learn, I have my own obligation. Now is a present obligation I have to be learning now. So how can I use this time to make up for yesterday's loss? And when you're learning Torah, that's the present mitzvah you're supposed to be doing right now, believing the Torah. So you can't make up for yesterday. Like we spoke in other times. And therefore, truthfully, the Rebbe says to try to make up for shlichus of last year is not really possible, because the shlichus that you were supposed to do last year is you can't make it up this year, because this year you have to do this year's shlichus. This year's mission of going out to the world and spreading Yiddishkeit and Chassidus. But the Rebbe says the point is, there's no point in crying about the past. The point is, this year, let's do it properly. Let's go out there. The Bachrim should go out in the summer to the very cities across the world, spreading Yiddishkeit. So how could you make a fix from last year? Is by putting in tremendous effort this year, energy. So you're not doing it in quantity, because the quantity of time is there. Anyways, you have to do this year, but maybe doubling in the quality. And maybe doing it longer, and this way you could try to make up for the lack of last year. Let's go a little further. The Rebbe says like this: Dover, the Rebbe spoke about it. That Sicha on Shavuos. There's 3 ideas of Shavuos. Matan Torah, it's the time we receive the Torah. That's always presently. This is the time of the year that always we're receiving the Torah, because the Torah is constantly present. Yom HaBikkurim is the time we had to bring the Bikkurim sacrifice. Shemitzvus Bikkurim av she'eni krevim al mizbech yiftei lechem el necholim lekoinim shaychs rakas v'anabayis. So the Bikkurim, that even though the Bikkurim is not a temple sacrifice, but nevertheless the Chag Bikkurim is the first fruit, where it was something that was done in the temple time, is in the Beis HaMikdash. And then there's the Chamish and the Sefiras HaOmer. Shavuos is the 50th day Sefiras HaOmer. Also not sure if there's a disagreement if the counting of the Omer nowadays is biblical or rabbinic. And the Rebbe talked about how this is all connected. These 3 ideas of Matan Torah, Chag HaBikkurim, and Yom HaChamishin, the 50 days for summer. The Rebbe spoke about it in length. We don't have the talk evidently. Number 50 teaches us that's in the Rishimas. It's in the Rebbe's notes. The Rebbe also spoke about it. This is a subject the Rebbe spoke at length many years, throughout the years, about crossing the date line during the Sefira, that disrupts the counting. How do you count if you're coming from Australia or vice versa, going to Australia, let's say, or even to China for that matter? You're crossing the date line and you stay there, or whichever way you're crossing, it disrupts your counting of Dover, because you have to count 50 days. Now you're going to a new time. there's many conversations about this in the Rebbe's talks. The Rebbe's bottom line is the Rebbe was against crossing the date line at all, specifically to cross the date line during the Sefira. Even though the person, let's say, crosses the date line and ends up in Australia the next day, you can't say, well, Shabbos for me is the day later because I only counted 6 days this week. Shabbos is wherever the place is, that's your Shabbos. It doesn't make a difference if you counted a full 7 days from the last Shabbos. That's obvious. We call them against Sefiras HaOmer, but Sefiras HaOmer is not so clear. There's a question. Each person has to count according to where they're holding. And if you join a congregation that's been counting a day earlier than you because the date line, so you haven't counted the full 49 days. The question is, do you join everyone else or you have to continue with your own count? The Rebbe discusses also this question about how the crossing the date line affects the counting of the Omer, also not just in the halakha question, but also what does this mean in our service of God? Sfira, I think I'm going to not do this piece. This is the Rebbe is making a siyum on Maseches Sotah. See how long it is here. Questions of Maseches Sotah finishes off where it talks about, then the Sotah talks about the different we'll learn it. Sfira. The days of Sfira, Maseches Sotah daf yom. We learn there's 49 pages counting from the first page, even though the first page doesn't exist. We always start with the second page. But there's 49 daf of in the Maseches Sotah corresponding to the 49 days of the Omer. Haskala b'Maseches daf beis. We start learning the first day of Chol HaMoed, which would be Yud Zayin of the month of Nisan. Yom Beis is Sefiras HaOmer, the second day is Sefiras HaOmer. The first day is the Sharblat, what we call. Loi b'Yom Sheni Yom Tov Shu Yom Rishon Sefiras HaOmer b'Yom Sheni Shel Chol HaMoed learned in Daf Gimel, and then the second day of Chol HaMoed, meaning let's say Yud Ches, we learn Daf Gimel, etc. We make a siyum on the 49th daf of Sotah on Erev Shavuos. So by Shavuos, we've already completed the Maseches Sotah. One of the ideas is that if a woman is a Sotah or accused of being a Sotah, she drinks the waters, and it wasn't true. The accusations were false, and she gets blessed with children. Nifkadas, and so there's a different opinion, like Rabbi Kiva, that says that if she was a barren woman, she'll start having children. Rabbi Shmuel says if that's the case, that's the best thing. If a woman can't have children, she wants to have children, she'll make her husband jealous, the Gemara says. He'll accuse her of having relations. She'll go that far to have children. And then she'll have to drink the waters of the Sotah because her husband accuses her. And then it'll turn out that it was false accusations. And then she'll have relations, she'll have children with her husband. So that's a plan. The worst case scenario, the Gemara says that Shmuel's mother threatened God like that. So they say, well, you can't say that. That's Rabbi Kiva says that. So Rabbi Shmuel says that's not possible. So the answer is that if you give birth usually in a difficult, so now you'll give birth easier. If you give birth to shorim, dark kids, or kids that are in a complexion that's not according to your liking, you'll let us levanim, you'll have white children. And what does that mean about Adam in his connection to Sefiras HaOmer? Then the Rebbe continues. We see Maseches Sotah Shnina. Then the Sotah it says, Mishemeis Rebbe, when Rebbe Rabbeinu Kodesh passes away, is Batla Nova V'Yirscheit. No longer were there people that had true humility or humbleness and God fear or fear of sin, I should say. So the Gemara says the Rebbe was, of course, the author of the Mishnah. So Amalei Rav Yosef. Yosef said to that Mishnah. So he said, they shouldn't have said anything about humility because I'm still here. So how could you say there's no more humility? Rav Yosef says, I have to remember, Rav Yosef was blind. And Rav Yosef, the Rebbe has a whole siyum and Tafshin Chafalef on Yud Bistam on Yud Nisan that Rav Yosef made a siyum. And why? Because he passed the age of 60. But he was a big honor. He was very humble. One of his main acts of humility is he didn't take the job of Rosh Yeshiva. He yielded to Rabbi. Shani and Vasan, like Rashi says, that he was humble. So therefore, they shouldn't say that there's no more humility, humbleness, anivus, because Rabbi Yosef, and he lived many years after Rebbe. Rav Nachman says that's the case. The time like this, a year's kite, he shouldn't talk about God, fear of sin, because I'm here. Which means I have fear of sin. So it hasn't been nullified. It means to say that we mentioned in the end of Sotah a whole bunch of things that sort of say died with the people that passed away. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and others, the Rebbe, different people that they were champions of certain either ways of teaching or avodah or things that they excelled in, and ever since they passed away, no one ever reached that kind of level. So Rabbi Yosef and Nachman are calling, saying, how could you say that since Rebbe passed away, there's no more humility, there's no more fear of sin? Rabbi Yosef said, I'm humble, and Rabbi Nachman said, Nachman said, I have a fear of sin. So therefore, it hasn't stopped. So the Rebbe said, I asked on there's many talks of the Rebbe on this, but I was stuck love it. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Nachman, him Amarayim. How could they say that? They're later generation. They're times of the Talmud. They're telling the Tana, means the author of the Mishnah, which is the Rebbe himself, or who have you, is that they shouldn't include these two things because he's wrong to include them because I'm humble and I'm a fear of sin. That's obvious. Another question. First, second question is the whole statement itself is contrary to the point. How can a person who's humble say, I'm humble? That's contradiction. We're going to get back to what we started with Sicha, that's we have to understand what humility is. Each one says that one says I was an honor, another says I was a fear of sin. So the Yidden Behegim understand this, but we explained in the beginning of the talk in the Sicha with regard to humility. Again, humble is not a person who's lacking self-confidence. An onav knows exactly how strong their qualities are. Army that knows that the qualities that they have, and they're not just smart or strong or wealthy, but even character pluses like humility itself, they know that these are important qualities that they have. They don't attribute these qualities, even in their character, to be something that they could take pride in, because it was gifted to them from Hashem. They're called this is an inheritance you have, being a son of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel. Again, it's very much applicable to this week's parsha, where it talks about Anibus with Moshe Rabbeinu. The true honor has the honesty to make a calculation. Like we said about Moshe Rabbeinu, had someone else had these qualities, maybe they would have utilized them better. They would have been a better custodian of the qualities that they've been given by the Rebbes. So to Rabbi Yosef, he knew how great he was in the study of Torah. He wasn't dishonored with false humility. If not for the day of Matan Torah, he said, I learned Torah and I was elevated. I'll be another Joe in the market. Torah made me who I am. But he was so great that they called him like the mountain of Sinai. Because he was so clear in the Mishnah and the Brisa, it was as if he was giving it over from Sinai. That's how great of a scholar he was. He didn't attribute all those qualities, saying that I'm so special because of something I myself accomplished. It was the day of Shavuos, it was the day of Matan Torah that caused him to be so great. Therefore, even in such honest evaluation, he was even able to know his quality in character, that he was an honor, and not taking it as a claim to something he achieved. Having humility and knowing that you have humility is still not a contradiction. Even if you know that you have humility, because you're not feeling great or attributing it to yourself. You've been gifted to be a humble person. Like other things in character people have that they know. So not a person who's slow to anger. Sometimes it's work, it's a lot of work, and sometimes that's just your nature. And even when it comes with effort, it's the tools for the effort were given to you. The point is, you never take something as if you own it. You own your specialty. You own that it's yours. It's been given to you. Everything's been gifted to you. Even character traits, even the tools you have to work on yourself has been gifted to you. Yeah, that's why he says don't add. Even though he's a younger generation, he's telling the Tana, the Rabbi of the Mishnah, don't add humility because I'm around. Because he didn't realize that even his humility was given to him from above. He's saying here, and here the Rebbe is going to the Skash's part. Rabbi Yosef is a Talmud of Rebbe, like it says, it's B'schus Avoisa, even though he wasn't a direct Talmud, but he was a Talmud of Rebbe, from Rebbe. And therefore, he knows that you're saying, Mishemeis Rebbe died, there's no more Nava. Don't say that. The fact that I have a Nivus is because I got it from Rebbe. So Rebbe lives on in me. Rebbe Lemeis. He's not arguing with the Tanya that Rebbe, Mishemeis Rebbe Batla Nava. Shliloi Rebbe ain't oid malas Nava. Kiyim shal uvda deikana shani have nasan rechik Rebbe Lemeis. Not arguing that if Rebbe would die, there wouldn't be any more humility. But the very fact that I'm humble is only because I'm a student of Rebbe, which means if I'm alive and I'm an Anav, means Rebbe's not dead. What the Mishnah is going into saying things that when this person passed away, the thing ended. But if I'm still living the legacy of Rebbe didn't die. Anova mitis yidis mas atzmim mechad gisa v'tachas abitul. This ability that a person should be totally humble and know that they're humble and know that it's not their own ability is only because I'm a student of Rabbi. It means Rabbi lives within me. Same thing when Rav says. How could you say there's no that there's no more fear of sin? I'm here, behected. So what did he mean? This the Rebbe says. What's this? Why does Yosef choose, or why was he given humility and Rav Nachman fear of sin? Rabbi Yosef, like I said before, Rabbi Yosef was blind. Saginor means too much light, which is an expression of blindness. Like the Gemara says about him, therefore he knows that he's not going to die from Karas. So he had no Yetzirah. So therefore there was no sin, that he had to be scared of the sin. You don't say that he's fear of sin. Therefore, he felt in him there was the primary expression was humility. He was humble that he wasn't a person that had a sin. The Rav Nachman say something opposite about it. The Gemara teaches us, stargazers told Rav Nachman's mother, your son is Nachman is going to be a thief. He's going to be a bandit. So what did she do? She wanted to take action. How could she prevent her son from falling into the hand of robbery and to be a bandit? She always covered his head. She put a kippah, a yarmulke on his head all times. She covered his head because covering your head means to be God-fearing. Because to be God-fearing, he's not going to join the bandits. Therefore, he realized his mother put in so much effort to never leave his head uncovered, so he should always be God-fearing. Mr. Rebbe continues. But he still had the characters of a thief in a holy way. It says a person who's born, the mazel of Adam is Mars, is going to spill blood. So you could be a shaychet. You could be a person who becomes a slaughterer, not that you're going to kill people. You could be moyel. Means you could say, yes, I was born in the month of in the mazel of Madim, which is Mars, but I'm going to use it to be a shaycha, to be a moyel. It means I have a connection to blood, but not a murder. So too, you could have the connection of a ganif, a thief, for things of kedusha. But koichel said, tisei alaka means to learn, to steal another 5 minutes of learning Torah. You know what? I'm supposed to stop learning now and learn another 5 minutes. I'm going to stop doing a little longer. That comes from the character of taking extra, stealing from time of something else. I could have relaxed. I'm not going to relax. I'm going to do something else. That's the character of the thief in a holy way. And also this idea, this power he has that he should be God-fearing is also from Rebbe. One of the things the Gemara tells us about Rebbe, about his years chait, he never put his hand under his belt, below his belt. He didn't have things that some things he was like in the world, things under his belt, and some things he was holy. He didn't have two sides to it. Like a person who has the difference between half of the body and lower half of the body. And by separating those two things, that could lead, minus is to lead to be a heretic. Eventually, it could lead you to the path because you have two sides within you. The person thought that his upper body, that's the breathing that comes from God. The lower part of the body, where the food is digested, that's the part of the person. So he had split things. I think that he connected to the higher and lower. Rebbe never put his hand under his belt. You're always holy. Even though he was very wealthy and he didn't have lacking any delicacies on his table. Even out of season, he had all the vegetables and fruits, like a real wealthy, like a person who's very wealthy, that there's never an item out of season in his house because he's getting imports from all over the world. He was able to testify himself. The Rebbe says in Tanya, he was able to hold his 10 fingers up to God and say honestly, even my small pinky didn't take joy in this world. Even though if you looked at him, everything was wealthy. He was as wealthy as Caesar. But it was all display. It wasn't him. And therefore Rebbe was able to have that control. Rav Nachman was able to say that if I am Yiras Chet, Rebbe is still alive. Even the things that were in the worldly things by him was all heaven. Being a student of Rebbe, in the years Chet, he should be able to be God-fearing, and therefore fearing of a sin. Therefore, Rebbe is still alive. Again, he's not arguing on the time that Mishemeis Rebbe but the years Chet, that Rebbe personifies fear of sin. Only Rebbe represents fear of sin. Again, the fact that he has fear of sin is only because he's drawing energy from Rebbe, means Rebbe is still alive. The Rebbe saying is the Rebbe is still alive. And therefore, the idea that when the Rebbe dies, something dies with the Rebbe, Chas v'Shalom, is no such thing. If you have those qualities, it means the Rebbe is still alive. Again, these are Haskash V'Sichas. Dave writes this based on the Navi, Sefiras HaOmer. He talks, the Rebbe spoke about, again, at length, the difference between fearing of sin and another, and its foundation, its importance in avodah Hashem. What is the difference between the learning of Chassidus and Musar? Rebbe says that one of the benefits is that if you're learning Chassidus, even if it doesn't affect you, at least you're learning about God, which is only talking the negative. So if you're not scared of the negative, so then the conversation was a waste of time because you didn't gain anything. Chassidus, at least you're learning about Hashem. Not at least, but you're learning about Hashem. The Rebbe spoke about Oidus HaShaychus ben Baal Shem Tov David HaMelech Shem started B'Chag HaShavuos, both of Baal Shem Tov and then David HaMelech passed away in Shavuos. Al Pi Ma'am Rizal, based on the teaching that we have, Derech HaKoshes David HaMelech Shamir Stilim Techotip K'moi ha'esik and the going boilers. We know that David Melech asked that when we say Tehillim, it should have the same effect. The person who deals with the very complicated laws of the goyim, which are leprosies, and the laws of the tents that encompass a dead body and therefore causes impurities. Again, very complicated laws of impurity and purity. That when one says Tillim, which seemingly is just reading words, should be as if God considers you're learning the most complex parts of Mishnayos and Allah. These things which are very difficult. Why are you talking about the avodah thing? Your job is to be telling us the laws of negoim, of leprosies and tents that are encompassing parts of a body and brings in the tomb, what they said the tomb. Rebbe spoke so too. Chassidus is by learning Chassidus, even though maybe you're not going to finish the thought, but Rebbe didn't say what it means. But I'm assuming what it means is that by learning Chassidus is also like you're learning the most complicated subjects of Torah, even though Chassidus itself is complicated. You see Masvadis at the end of the Fabregan, and I'm going a little faster because it's the end of the Fabregan. Next week, Be'ezus Hashem, we'll learn something and ready for Yudbis Thomas and for Gimel Thomas and start learning from the next talk after Yud Aleph Sivan. I think it's ready at Pasha Shalach, but we'll start there. The Sima is father, Shamar Kvayt Shamar Sita. At the end of Fabregan, the Rebbe said, Hashem Yisparach Yazer, Hashem should help. Sheyavik Kvayt Shamar Cham Yadmo, the decree the Rebbe should come. As he is soul in body. That when versprochen beten sagen Chassidus, that they'll stop asking me to say Chassidus. They were already pressuring the Rebbe on Shavuos, a few months after Yud Aleph Nis, after Yud Shvat, that the Rebbe should say a mimer. It's Einim HaGolus and should take us out of this bitter Golus. Kinira, the Rebbe says in the same footnote number 73, the older Hasidim were trying to pressure the Rebbe to say a mimer. I said, the Rebbe says, Mashiach should come, the Fitiker will be here, and it'll stop bothering me to say mimer. I say to who although we know that the resurrection of the dead is going to happen after the coming of Mashiach. There's going to be individuals that will come back to life before Mashiach comes. And if all the people that are going to come back before is going to be Kvayt Shemar Kam Yadmo. Will come back at soul and body. Yavi in he's going to come. It doesn't make a difference how it's going to happen. Whether he's going to walk through the door, if he's going to climb through the window or land through the window. He's going to break through the ceiling. The Rebbe is going to come before Mashiach comes. The Rebbe is going to come before Mashiach comes. The Yosef is called B'nai Yisrael. He's going to gather all the Jewish people. The Yachris, and he's going to announce, it's time to leave Golus. Let's go together to Eretz HaKodesh and start the coming of Mashiach, or the building of Beis HaMikdash. A wonderful Shabbos. Thank you for joining.